progress.
Yeah, Chairperson has been having problem with the network, but I hope it won't distract us. Chairperson, is now 1 minute past 9 o'clock. And then I think we need to start with our meeting. The other thing that I would also like to remind members is that the meeting is being broadcast on YouTube and I think Parliament TV. So I will request that all members, when they speak, when a member speaks, then they must switch on their video. And then that also will be depending on their stability of their network as well. And then when one member is speaking, then the others can switch off their videos and then just listen. And then we'll also request that members should as well mute when they are not speaking. Thanks, Chairperson. Over to you.
Thanks very much, Mr. Matonsi. The agenda which has been circulated will serve as a guiding tool for proper facilitation to this joint portfolio committee meeting of Home Affairs and the Select Committee on Justice and Security. Extend our greetings to the chair of the Select Committee on Security and Justice, Honorable Shahida Sheikh. Greetings to all honorable members present to this meeting. We extend our greetings to the Minister Mzwaledi and the DM, the chairperson of the IC, Ntate Mashinini, and all commissioners, the CEO, Mr. Saima Mabulo, and the entire executive team, our officials, and the member of the community, media community. Today, this joint meeting convened to receive an update or brief on the outcomes of the constitutional order in relation to the local government election. You know that, members, we did receive a briefing as a result of the inquiry that was conducted by the former Deputy Chief Justice Moseneke. Its recommendation that was processed by the IEC and adopted by the IEC and presented to the Committee of Home Affairs for noting. And you know that the approach of the IEC was to approach the Constitutional Court to determine the recommendation in line with what the former Chief Justice has recommended. Now, this meeting today will take note on the progress post the Concord order in terms of the plans of the IEC in relation to the process that we're going to engage on the registration, voter registration, and the general overall process of readiness of the local government election. We'll also take appreciation the Minister and the Director General on your progress in relation to the distribution of the ID. And I think you'll take note of that area as we engage in this process. Members, the IEC has been consistently articulated its position on their readiness for local government election. And now this meeting will draw more attention on the planning forward as a result of the Concord, as I've indicated earlier on, and the preparation of the voter registration and the local government election. There are areas that are parallel to that effect on other political parties going to court on the areas that are discomfort on that. That will allow that process. And I don't think that we'll be able to enter in that space as we engage on this briefing. So this briefing needs to give confidence in terms of the position on the implementation and how the IEC will carry forward both the event, both the activity, both the voter registration and the local government elections. We're going to be assisted by the chairperson of the Select Committee on Security and Justice, where she will render a closing remark as we towards the closing of this meeting. Our meeting is going to end at 12 o'clock. As you know that the House sitting and members has to prepare to attend the House sitting. We're going to at least be requesting all members, honorable members, the IEC, to assist each other to at least to be specific on areas that we're going to comment on and the areas that we're going to respond to members of the committee so that we utilize time. The chair will not, both myself and Honorable Shaida will be tight on time, but members will be allowed to space to at least have enough space to comment, raise questions, and perhaps offer advices in terms of how can we consolidate our work as a team so that we have a credible, free and fair elections. The IEC over time has demonstrated its capacity in terms of conducting the election in the country, that its outcome are democratic, free and fair. Mr. Matunzi, I will invite you to render the item number 2 on apologies. I will then go to the IEC if there are any apologies and introduction, and the minister if there are apologies and introduction. Then we'll get to item number 3. Mr. Matunzi?
Yes, Chairperson. I've got 3 apologies for Advocate Bongo, Ms. van der Merwe, and Ms. Mulegwa. And then I'll hand over to my colleague from the SOP if he has got any apologies.
Thank you, Chair. From the side of the Select Committee on Security Justice, there are no apologies. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, both our Secretariat. Can I invite the Minister if there's any apology and introduction of the team, and I'll go to the Chairperson of the IEC, Ndate Mashinini, for the apology and introductions. Minister?
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Good morning to the Chairperson of the IEC and the IEC team, and also to the CEO. Chairperson, let me give to the DG. I can see my team there is there, led by the DG. Let me give it over to him to make any apologies. But I see the head of civics, Mr. Thomas Sigama, who's the main person from Home Affairs here. And I'm not sure whether it's him or the DG. Mr. Sigama, do you have any other person?
Thank you, Minister. Director General.
Morning, Chair, morning, DJ. I'm not the Director General. It's Thomas Sigama. We happen to share the same initials. I am alone, Minister and Chairperson. I will be able to answer questions pertaining to civics. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister, and Mr. DTG, Mr. Sigama. Chairperson of the IEC, Mr. Mashinini.
Thank you, Chair. We have a team that has been delegated to come along to the meeting, and that includes the Vice Chairperson of the Commission, Ms. Janet Love, and Commissioner Dr. Masugu, and also Commissioner Miepia. And I'm not sure if the judge will be joining us. I think she has sent an apology, if I'm not mistaken. Together with the Commission, we have the administration team led by our CEO, Mr. Mamabulo, who, Chair, if I can indicate in advance, has another prior interview at about 10 o'clock. He might leave us for a while and come back. But with him, we should be having Mr. Shiburi, the deputy who will take the presentation, together accompanied by the EXCO members, Mem Terry Henning, Mr. George Matlangu, who is the chief executive responsible for party funding, and Mr. Mosri, who is our deputy CEO, and the administrative support team led by Mlungisi Kilembe. That's the team, Chairperson. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much for the introduction and the apologies. We take note and accept the apologies of honorable members, Honorable Bongo Thomas, I'm saying Advocate Bongo Thomas, Ms. Honorable van der Merwe, and Honorable Mulegwa. and the apology that has been presented by the IEC of the chief executive, who will be leaving the meeting at 10 and coming back after his commitment. Thanks very much for those to rendering item number 2. I'll invite the minister to introduce if there are remarks, and the chairperson of the IEC will then take the delegation. Minister.
Thank you, Chair. Let me defer to the chairperson of the IEC because this is their meeting. I will help to answer questions later on if there are any. But for now, let me defer to the chairperson. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Minister. Chairperson Mashinini.
Thank you, Honorable Chairperson of the Portfolio Committee, Mr. Chabane, and the Honorable Chairperson of the Select Committee on Security and Justice, Madam Shaikh, Honorable members of the Portfolio Committee and the Select Committee on Security and Justice present here, members of the media who are with us, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, thank you, Honorable Chairs, for having afforded us, the Commission, to actually share or present our state of readiness to hold the 2021 local government elections and other related issues as outlined in the agenda by the chair in his opening remarks. Firstly, allow me to congratulate you, Honorable Chabane, on your appointment as the chairperson of the Portfolio Committee. We are highly indebted to the guidance of the committee under your chairpersonship in our quest to fulfill our constitutional obligations. And I wish to express that as the whip, we've enjoyed working with you. And so we are very pleased to see that you've now been assigned this responsibility. We hope that we will continue working together as we've worked before. And honorable members, I just wish to say that I'm having a technical problem here with my system. It seems to be jamming. My apologies to you all. The purpose of the meeting, as we understood it today, is just to outline our preparations for the upcoming local government elections as they've already been announced by the Honorable Minister of COPTA, Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma. As you all know, honorable members, that the Commission has been seized with the preparation for these local government elections since 2019. And from that time, numerous measures were undertaken to ensure that these elections took place within the existing legal framework. Among these were the legislative amendments to align our electoral legislative framework with new approaches to managing the elections. And these amendments were approved by both committees that are present here and were assented by the President of the Republic of South Africa, Honorable His Excellency Ramaphosa. And in these numerous engagements with the Portfolio Committee, the Commission indicated that it was acquiring new technology to facilitate the registration of the voters. And this new technology would enable us to respond to the constitutional judgment that on Clockwork with respect to the registration of the voters. And the advent of the COVID pandemic in 2020 also necessitated a number of considerations that were to be made, which among them included a consideration to motivate for the postponement of the election. And in this particular period also, we also had a number of by-elections that were postponed. And in dealing with the COVID, the commission then had to bring the expertise of Justice Moseneke to inquire as to whether the COVID-induced conditions will enable us to conduct the elections freely and fairly. And when that inquiry concluded, the commission concluded that this would not be possible to achieve free and fair elections. And the commission accepted the report of the inquiry and approached the Constitutional Court for a deferral of the elections until February 2022. And on the 3rd of September, a Constitutional Court issued an order which clearly instructs the commission to hold the elections in the period between the 27th of October and the 1st of November. And we are yet to receive the full judgment on the matter. However, the commission undertook to fully abide by the order of the court, and honorable chairpersons and members of the joint committee, allow me then now to invite the Deputy Chief Electoral Officer, Mr. Shibori, to make the full presentation of our proceedings today. I thank you, Chairperson.
No, thank you, Chairperson Mashinini. Mr. Shibori.
Good morning, chairpersons, honorable minister, honorable members, members of the commission, colleagues. The presentation is broken down into the following aspects. First, I will give the understanding of the Electoral Commission as it relates to the order handed down by the Constitutional Court on the 3rd of September. Secondly, we will decipher the implications of the court order for election administration. Thirdly and lastly, we will deal with the decision of the Commission as it relates to operationalizing the order handed down by the Apex Court. We all know now that the ConCourt handed down its order on the 3rd of September 2021. As yet, that order does not have reasons. However, there are very other clear things arising from that order that the Commission has already taken decisions around. And to contextualize discussion and to deal with the issues in the public domain that have the tendency of mischaracterizing the order, I propose that we deal with each of those orders in turn. The first is that the court granted direct access and agreed to hear the application as that of agency. The indication there is that the court accepted that there was constitutional merit in the application, and it was not a frivolous application. That's why it agreed to grant direct access and to hear the matter on an expedited schedule. The second and key order of the court was that the court declared the proclamation by the Minister of Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs unconstitutional, invalid, and set that proclamation aside. I will, when I deal with the implications of the court, also deal with the implication of the court's decision to set aside the proclamation, because setting aside the proclamation has implications both in law and in terms of the electoral program. Additionally, the court that the commission must within 3 days determine whether it is practically possible to hold a voter registration weekend ahead of elections that must be held no later than the 1st of November 2021. And if the commission determines that it is possible to hold a voter registration weekend, the commission is directed to conduct a voter registration. Again, the court says on the day following the voter registration weekend, the minister must issue a proclamation determining a date for the local government elections that must be held no later than the 1st of November. So there were 2 options that the court granted to the commission. The first is to determine if it is practically possible to hold a general voter registration weekend. The second was that the commission, if the commission determines that it is not practically possible to hold a voter registration weekend, the minister must not earlier than the 10th of September issue a proclamation determining a date for the elections, which must be held no later than the 1st of November 2021, and that the commission must enable voters to register at the offices of the commission between the 3rd of September and the 10th of September 2021. I just wish to deal with these 2 options and to indicate that the commission has opted to take the difficult route of organizing a general voter registration. Why did the commission not take the easier route of only registering voters at its offices? Why would it go through the difficulty of organizing a general voter registration weekend at such notice? The answer is as follows. We have a network of local offices that amount to about 250. Juxtapose that with the number and network of voting stations, which amounts 23,151. If we took the less painful option of registering people between the 3rd and the 10th at the local office of the IEC, that would have meant that a sizable majority of persons would not have equitable opportunities to register as voters and to update their registration details because of inaccessibility of the network of voting stations. And that decision is hinged on the Commission understanding of its constitutional obligation, in that it must compile and maintain a voter's roll that accords with the founding foundations of the Constitution in Section 1D, i.e. that voters' roll must be common and it must allow for universal access to the right to vote. So if the rights of persons to register or to update their details is limited by their inability to access an office of the Electoral Commission, that voters' roll cannot be said to be common, because now there are qualifiers of means to access a voting station as a qualifier to access the right to be on the voters' roll. For that reason, the Commission opted that it will open voting stations on the 18th and the 19th and provide registration at facilities that offer convenience of access and that are located close to where people live. It is an equalizer. Voting stations are an equalizer of opportunity, because within walking distance, every one of the citizens in the country may be able to access a voting station. The next key thing that came from the order of the court is as follows. The court said the timetable published by the Commission on the 4th of August. You'll recall that the minister first proclaimed the election on the 3rd of August. The following day, the Commission published a timetable. The court said that timetable shall remain applicable. In other words, the court preserves that timetable, said, notwithstanding the fact that an election date has been set aside, that timetable that the Commission issued on the 4th of August shall remain applicable. So that timetable is preserved. However, the preservation is not in perpetuity, because the very same sentence of that judgment says, save that as soon as possible after the issuing of the proclamation, the Commission must, and those are very peremptory terms, the Commission must, in terms of Section 1(2) of the Municipal Electoral Act, publish such amendments to the current timetable as may be reasonably necessary. The timetable is preserved for the time, and once the minister proclaims an election on the 20th following the registration weekend of the 18th and 19th, the Commission can exercise its prerogative in law to amend that timetable for purposes of facilitating free and fair election to the extent that is reasonably necessary. And I think that is key, because some commentators have presented this thing as though the court has constrained the power of the Electoral Commission to amend the Constitution, to amend the electoral timetable for purposes of free and fair elections. The Commission has had consultations with key stakeholders, including political parties, on the timetable that the Commission intends to amend and issue following proclamation by the Minister responsible for cooperative and governance and traditional affairs. Just to underscore the point, while the current timetable remains extant, it is so only until the proclamation is issued by the Minister. And after that point, the Commission can, in terms of Section 11(2), amend that Constitution for purposes of ensuring free and fair elections. Another issue will relate to the fact that why the timetable also facilitates resubmission by political parties, independent candidates, of candidature documents, when in past instances, and what people have relied on, they've quoted the NFP and the IFP case to say, why in this case are you reopening candidate nomination when in previous elections we have refused? In other words, why are you acting inconsistent? There is no inconsistencies there, because the facts as obtained in the NFP and the IFP case do not object here, they do not arise here. In those two cases, the court said it is not open to the Electoral Commission to amend the timetable in an ad hoc fashion to accommodate parties that had missed submission of candidate nomination dates or failure to make deposit in terms of the cutoff time. In the current case, all parties that had come to the Commission after the close of nomination on the 23rd of September to ask for an extension were refused such extension. It is only possible now to amend the timetable because a proclamation has been set aside, and I'll deal with that now when I deal with the implication, and that the voters' roll has since been reopened. In the IFP and the NFP cases, there was no setting aside of a proclamation. It was parties who had missed a deadline, and the Commission had refused to reopen the deadline, and the court had affirmed that the Commission can only amend the timetable, not for ad hoc purposes, but only to facilitate and secure free and fair elections. The last point to be made on the order of the court is that in the court order, the court said the economic freedom fighters' conditional application for the relief set out in paragraphs 4 and 5 of its notice of motions is dismissed. We will recall that the EFF had joined the proceedings, and one of its relief was a conditional relief that even if the court finds against the Electoral Commission, the court must still authorize that a period of candidate nomination must be extended. It doesn't follow that the dismissal of that prayer by the EFF, by the Concord, means that the Commission cannot amend the timetable to reopen a a period of candidate nomination, because the understanding of the commission is that the prayer of the Electoral Commission in 5 was conditional on prayer 4. And prayer 4 said in broad terms, the court must order the president, the minister of COGTA, and the National Command Council to amend the regulations within 7 days of the court having made that order. And conditional to that order being made, the commission must then within 2 days amend the timetable to prolong the period of candidate nomination. So when the court did not grant the relief sought by the EFF in their prayer 4, the conditional prayer or relief in prayer 5 that opened the proclamation was also dismissed. It does not equate to the fact that the court said you can never reopen a period of candidate nomination. As I said, the court said once proclamation is reissued, the commission may, for purposes of freeness and fairness of election, amend the timetable. The implications of the court order are, among others, as follows. 1, declaring the proclamation by the minister as unconstitutional, invalid, and being set aside has the impact of unsealing the voters' roll. Because in terms of the law, on the date that the proclamation is issued, the voters' roll is sealed and it must be used as is for an election. So the net impact of setting aside a proclamation means persons can continue to register as voters. They can continue to update their details on the roll. And in this instance, the court said they can do so if the commission elects to hold a registration weekend. They can do so, and a day following the registration weekend, the minister must proclaim. So the voters' roll is now reopened until the minister issues a new proclamation on the 20th of September. Registration on the roll entitles citizens a number of rights, and I do not intend to go through all of them, but chief among those are the rights contained in Section 158 of the Constitution, as well as political rights contained in Section 19 of the Constitution. Section 158 of the Constitution provides that a person who has a right to vote for a municipal council is entitled to stand for election in that council. So that is a condition. Once you are registered, you are entitled to vote, but you are also entitled to stand for elected office. Similarly, in terms of Section 19 of the Constitution, at least a number of rights are guaranteed. One being the right to vote in free and fair elections, the other being the right to nominate candidates, the third being the right to stand for public office, and if elected, to hold office. So the amendment of the timetable is intended to extend the suite of rights to citizens who may have registered after the proclamation was set aside and who will register on the weekend set aside for voter registration, and to indicate that their rights are not just rights as voters, their rights as nominators. Their rights also include a right to stand for and, if elected, to hold a public office. The second issue we've dealt with is that the implication of the court order is that the timetable published on the 4th of August 2021 is preserved, but only until a new proclamation is issued, and that proclamation must be issued by the 20th. And then after proclamation, the commission and the court order uses peremptory terms must publish such amendments as may be reasonably necessary for free and fair elections. So the draft amendments by the commission are not ad hoc amendments, but they are amendments reasonably necessary to give effect to the order of the court, but also to honor the science behind the electoral scheme. The last point to be made on the implication is that the statutory responsibility of the commission to effect adjustments to the timetable for purposes of free and fair elections in Section 11.2 of the Municipal Electoral Act has not been constrained or has not been taken away or has not been amended by the order of the court. In the circumstance, the Commission has taken a number of decisions, and I think I may have deleted a slide. The decisions are as follows. The first is that the Commission has now scheduled a voter registration for 18th and 19th of September 2021. The second is that the Commission will, following proclamation, issue an amended timetable which is consequential to the registration of voters. And the amendments will implicate, among others, the amendments to the timetable will affect, among others, the period of objections to the voters' roll, the period for special vote applications, cut-off period for candidates, for candidate nomination, period for parties to exercise an election to take a decision on candidates who appear on multiple lists. What do we mean by this? A candidate may be nominated by party Y, but also be nominated by party Z. So the Commission will make those instances available to nominating parties so that those parties can take a decision whether they retain that person on the segment of, on their list of candidates, or they replace that candidate. The last point was that the Commission had recommended to the Minister a preferred voting day of the 1st of November 2021, because given the truncated timetable and given the fact that we're squeezing in a registration weekend, we will need every hour of the day, every day of the week in order to be ready to run constitutionally compliant elections on the 1st of November. So for the first time, and following the proclamation, following the announcement by the Minister, she will proclaim the 1st of November as an election date. An election will be held on a day other than a Wednesday. It will be held on Monday, the 1st of November, preceded by 2 days of special vote on the 30th and the 31st. What are special votes? Special votes are an inclusive opportunity that is granted to persons who, absent that dispensation, would not be able to exercise their right to franchise. People who are registered as voters but are unable to come to a voting station because of a physical condition or infirmity or illness, those persons can apply or cause an application to be made on their behalf, and if approved, we will visit those persons in places of confinement within their wards. Second category are persons who, while registered, will be away from their voting districts on the day of election. That category of voters can apply by SMS or online, and if approved, they can vote by special vote in their voting district on the day 1 or day 2 of special vote before they travel away from their voting district. Typically, those will be electoral staff, party agents, people who work in connection with elections, security officers from SAPs who work to secure the elections and are deployed outside the areas of their ordinary residence. And as I indicated, the Commission has concluded consultations with the Minister as well as political parties in the National Party Liaison Committee. We will be technically ready to hold a voter registration on the day of the 18th and the 19th of September. We are on course to deliver a constitutionally compliant elections on the 1st of November. And the difficult decision to introduce a general voter registration weekend ahead of an already squeezed timeline was to ensure that these elections can approximate as close as possible the constitutional standard, because going into an election without affording voters equitable opportunities to refresh their details and to register as voters would have risked that election being set aside for want of constitutional compliance. Chairpersons of the committee, that concludes the input of the Electoral Commission. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, the chairperson of the IEC, Mr. Mashinini, and Mr. Shiburi, Deputy CEO, for the presentation. We're going to note, members, the chairperson of the select committee and myself have advised that our members, some of the members will be joining. Some still have network challenges. Members who are in this meeting that we're going to know to them is Honorable Mudise Mta, Honorable Tito, Honorable Ngosi, Honorable Kanyile, Honorable Hwase, Honorable Sleku, Honorable Mikalakis, Honorable Bartlett, Honorable Mkiva, Honorable Ross, Honorable Pillay, and the chairperson of the select committee. If there's a member of both the committees who I could not note, the secretariat and the chair will assist without disrupting the meeting. Let me start to invite members to interact with the report, with the briefing of the IEC, and then after we'll request the IEC to give a response, comments, and the minister, if there are issues that are directed to the Home Affairs, to give a response, comment, then we'll work towards closing the session. Honorable Mudise Mta.
Thank you so much, Chairperson. And let me also appreciate the presentation as it has been done by the IEC. Chair, my first point will be to appreciate the previous initiative that has been taken by the IEC to appoint the former Deputy Chief Justice with the objective to create a conversation or a dialogue with our people, all political parties and other stakeholders, for them to participate in regards to the process of the elections. I think that process would have empowered our people and broadened our understanding of free and fair elections. At the same time, Chair, the IEC in the previous meeting, they would have pronounced their position on their state of readiness with regard to holding the 2021 elections, and they would have indicated that they are ready. This has continued to affirm and demonstrate that as a Chapter 9 institution, they are in pursuit of conducting free and fair elections. And I think in that regard, we need to commend them. As they were awaiting the process of the Concord, they would have not stopped doing their work in preparations towards the local government elections. Given your presentation, I want to venture into your voter registration weekend that is planned for the 18th and 19th of September, just to check the state of readiness with that regard, because the presentation did not really give much details. What are the logistical plans with regards to materials, with regards to the training of staff, and with regards to the adherence of the precautionary measures of COVID-19? We know that it is not normal times, and therefore we will not conduct the voter registration and the elections as if the status quo is normal. It is not normal. Therefore, I want to check what are the plans in place regarding the preparations of the upcoming weekend. With COVID-19, I would think or assume that also the human resource or the human capital will need to increase, and that will also have implications on your budget. It means you will need more funding or more funds budgeted in order for you to increase your human resource capital. People will be queuing outside those voting stations for registrations. So you will need more staff that will ensure that on those queues, people are adhering to COVID-19 social distancing, to make sure that at all times they wear their mask and from time to time to ensure that they sanitize members in those queues. Therefore, those PPEs should be in place to ensure that that takes place. And that also speaks to the budgeting from the IEC. So I also want you to at least speak on the budget implications with regards to the voter registration weekend and more plans that you would have in preparations for it. The other matter would be the voting devices that we once had discussions upon. What is the status of that right now? Is it ready to be utilized for the upcoming elections? Is the IEC in their timetables willing to consider extending the special voter categories, taking into consideration the COVID-19, to say, we know that normally it will be people with disabilities who will not be able to leave their homes and access the voter stations. But due to COVID-19, we know that 40-year-old, 50-year-olds might have comorbidities that might impede on them accessing the voter stations. And also to make sure that we limit a number of people who will be queuing for longer hours in those voter stations. Could you then consider extending the categories of the special voters and extend them to the 50-year-olds and other issues that are related to voter registration? The other issues on your timetable, you've spoken about the amendments after the proclamation by the minister. What implication does that have then on the opening up of the voter registrations vis-a-vis the opening up of candidates registrations? I want you to take us in depth with regards to the powers that the institutions of the IEC has with regards to the amending of the timetable. We are all aware that the issue of opening up the candidacy registration is in dispute right now. It has been televised all over the media and it's on news. I would not want you to get into the text or the details with regarding to what is in the courts right now. But I want you also to speak about the powers that the IEC has with regards to the timetable, because that also forms part of what is being disputed. So we also, as a committee, we need to be empowered with the constitutional rights and powers and authorities that the IEC has. Thank you so much, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Modise, for your contribution. Honorable Tito.
Thanks, Chairperson. Greetings to everyone who is present today. Chair, I only have one question to ask to the IEC. During the unrest on the two provinces, the Gauteng and the KwaZulu-Natal province, was there any voting station that was vandalized? And if so, did they make any other plans, especially in this coming week of the registration, to make sure that people will have a proper place for the registration and also for the voting?
Thank you very much, Honorable Tito. I'm sure that was your comment. Thank you for your contribution. Honorable Kanyile.
Thank you, Chairperson, and greetings to everyone in the meeting. We welcome the presentation that we have received from the department, the IEC. The questions that I have been partly covered by Honorable Modise on the issue of the COVID protocols and the issue of reopening of the candidates registration, also considering that the matter is in the court. However, on that note, I have one question. I would like to know what are the costs for opening the registration for councillor or candidate registrations. And I've also noted that Mr. Sigama is in the meeting. And I think, Chairperson, you will know that under the Level 3 regulations, the Department of Home Affairs is not processing the applications of identity documents. And we have been receiving queries from members of the public indicating that some of them, they do not have IDs and they would like to register on the dates that have been set by the IEC. So what we would like from the department is to know if they'll be able to open for the ID applications. Chairperson, the IEC on a number of times, they have come before the portfolio committee and they have indicated that they have ordered the voting device. What I would like to know is that has these devices been delivered? If they have been delivered, I remember very well in the last meeting, we indicated that we would like to have these devices tested. When can we be able to be in a position to get these devices tested? Because we would want to ensure that we avoid a situation where we have people that have double voted, like it has been reported in the previous elections. Another question that I have, Chairperson, I would like to know if the IEC have enough funds to host the elections that are actually upcoming. The last question that I have, I would like to know that how much has the Moseneke Commission cost, as well as the report, as well as the cost of the IEC taking this matter to court to try and get the elections moved, knowing that the Constitution specifically prescribes regular elections as a foundational value of the Republic. I thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you very much, Honorable Kanyile. Honorable Mkene.
Thank you, Chairperson. Number one, I think there's one question that I agree with as well with my colleagues, is the one of the testing of the devices. Can you test these devices by Monday? Because at the end of the week, next week is a voter registration. We've never seen these devices. So can we test these devices and have a look at them? It's going to be a very busy week. So we propose that maybe by Monday, we must just try and set up so that we can have a look at them. So one way or another, so that we will ensure that one of the things that I used to raise in the meeting was the fact that we'll take people in the voting stations to register to vote. But at the end, when you come to the voting day, our people will not be appearing in those voters' rolls. So we've been going back and forth, and I'm happy that we're going to use this VMDs now, so that we ensure that our people are loaded, and we're sure about that. And then also, before I can get to the issue at hand, also that you know that there's an issue of the COVID-19 and 1.5 distance and all those kind of stuff like that. And then we have a sitting arrangement of which all the ground forces and the soldiers on the ground have been taken through it, as we discussed with the IC, in terms of how are they going to do, the party agents, the oversight on the votes of the EFF in terms of the sitting arrangement. So that has been put on the ground in terms of this is what is going to happen. Now there's this, the COVID-19 and the space. So does the IC have enough space to ensure that the party agents of all political parties are sitting in there? Because I know that the other ones, you've got some voting stations that look like a toilet, where sometimes that all the other political parties cannot fit in, and then they must sit somewhere as if maybe they are like invited, or they are uninvited guests. So you want to get an assurance that all voting stations, 23,152 voting stations, have enough space. And number two, there is electricity, there is sanitation, and there is security, and all of that. So I want to get from the IC, because we'll be having 23,152 volunteers who will be there and actually fitting back. Have they done an audit to ensure that all that is in place? Because some of the voting stations I know, I wouldn't remember now, some of them probably when we get there, there's no toilets and all of that. And there must be adequate innovation, the facilities on that. Now coming into the issue of the matter at hand, is that I have a couple of questions for the IEC. Now, number one, what does the IEC understand the court to be saying when it says that the election timetable published on the 4th of August is valid and applicable? Number two, what aspect in the timetable remains valid and lawful? Number three, does the IEC believe that the candidate nomination process it conducted to be valid and lawful now? Number four, does the IEC believe that the court has invalidated the election timetable it issued on the 4th and its candidate nomination process? Which law says, number five, which law that says if the court opens the voter registration, if the court opens the voter registration, then it automatically invalidates the candidate nomination process that was lawful and valid at the time it was conducted. And then number six, the relevance of the NFP case is that when the cutoff time of the registration of the parties to contest the election has passed, then there cannot be an extension for the new candidates. Does the IEC accept this? So the problem we're having here, fine. We've accepted that the elections are going to happen. The problem we are having here, the elephant in the room, of which we must not run away from, because the issue of registration that we took the easier route and all the kind of, that one is neither here or there, because you've been saying that you are ready. So I'm not worried about voter registration. It's a good thing. Let's open it up. People, they must go and register to vote. The elephant in the room that you will need to deal with, and let's not put a foot around it, is the issue of the opening of the candidates. Is it lawful now? Is the interpretation by the IEC lawful? Did the IEC get a proper legal advice in terms of opening that? Hence, now the matter is we can say those, the land. What's the word I'm looking for, Daniel? It's under. What's the word I'm looking for?
I think it's sub judice, honorable
sub judice. Yes, it's sub judice. I'm not. I forgot my Latin. So that is what it's the elephant in the room. So I've got those questions when my chairperson, of which that we should be able to deal with. Look, the horse has bolted. We're going to the elections. Now let us deal with that issue. Can we dive into it, and then can they go deeper in terms of maybe we have a different understanding of that order? Thank you very much, my chair.
Okay, thank you, Honorable Mcweni, for your contributions and questions. Honorable Nkosi. Okay, Honorable Lakwase.
Thank you very much, Chair, and my apologies. Where I'm sitting, the network is not stable. I'm by the constituency office. Chairperson, let me also welcome the presentation as done by the IEC and correctly applaud them for responding to the challenges they are facing and the difficulties they are facing towards these elections. I know it's not easy, and I want to applaud them for always availing themselves to deal with the challenges at an expected time. Chairperson, I can't reiterate what was said, especially by Honorable Mudise. At the hem of everything, one would want to be reassured on the readiness or the status that the IEC finds themselves in as we are facing the elections. And the question that I also want to make, I don't know if it's correct for me to raise this question as Honorable Mtini has already said, that the issue is sub judice, to say what may be the implications if the Concord can rule in favor of the DA, as they've taken the matter to the Concord on the reopening of the lists. I just want to check if the court rules in favor of the DA, what may be the implications of this. And Chair, without any waste of time, I think I was partly covered or mostly covered by Honorable Modise and Honorable Mtini on issues that were raised. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your contributions and questions. You can move on to the Lokwasi, otherwise you are disrupting. Thank you. Honorable Sileko.
Good morning, Chair. I'm covered. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Honorable Mikalakis. Okay, Honorable Bartlett.
Yes, thank you, Honorable Chairperson. Chair, I don't want to repeat what the other members have said because Honorable Modise almost covered all of the things that we wanted to ask, but just to say we welcome the presentation made by the IEC, and we'll just wait on the outcome of the Concord, and also to say that we are on the ground, we are busy working, and I think we will be ready to work until the 20th of September. But like I said, I don't want to repeat what the other colleagues said, but also we welcome the reopening of the voters' roll. I think we really appreciate the hard work that you did, Chair. Thank you very much. I don't want to repeat what other honorable members said.
Thank you very much, Honorable Bartlett, for your comments and questions. Honorable Mkiva.
Yes, comrade. Thank you very much, Chair. Let me take this opportunity, Mdwanomhle, report. I am also not going to open my video because of the instability of the network in my area. But we welcome the report from the ministry and the department, as well as from the leadership of the IEC. My main issue, Mdwanomhle, which I want to ask is the communication flowing from the IEC, that given all the restrictions that we have, what measures are there in terms of an effective communication that must reach even people in the periphery, particularly people in rural areas, as well as the issue of language that is employed, because the medium of instruction is always key on these matters. We do not want our people only to be reduced to be a voting fodder. We want them to follow the processes of what has been happening leading to this election so that they are well informed. The second issue is to commend the IEC for having taken a decision to open a window period for the submission of the candidates. That is very progressive because you can't afford, as a democracy like ours, which is growing and which is being enriched, to close out and employ some kind of gatekeeping. So we require much and a meaningful participation of our people in these elections. And I get worried when we have political parties who are concerned about closing the door on people who want to participate in an election which is democratic. What are they afraid of? Instead of taking a decision to say we are all wholeheartedly welcoming this window period because it gives us an opportunity to close ranks where we were unable to meet the deadline. And this is not the deadline of the political parties, actually. It is the communities that are participating in this election. It is the citizens of our people, of our country. And therefore, let's open up and stop this thing of wanting to prevent people from participation. So, Chair, it was just those two matters which I wanted to. So the network keeps on pumping. Thank you very much, Chairperson.
Thank you very much, Honorable Mkiva, for your contributions and questions. Honorable Nkosi, I see you are back now. Honorable Nkosi.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Let me start apologizing. When you were calling me, I was trying to unmute. I don't know what has happened with my gadget, but I'm back now. Chair, one must take this opportunity to thank you for the detailed presentation that was presented before this committee and applaud the department for the hard work done. But mostly, Chair, I must be honest with you that I'll be wasting your time. I'm covered by Honorable Modise and Honorable Mkiva. Most of my things that I wanted to say has been said by them. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you very much for your contribution, Honorable Nkosi, Honorable Ross.
Thank you, Chair. I'll be as brief as possible today. Chair, you rightly said that in your introduction that we need to talk about the specifics of readiness. And when we received the presentation at 1 minute to 7 last night, I think we were fully expecting specific details of readiness, as the IEC has apparently been ready for months. So 3 issues in this regard, Chair. I think a few further questions in terms of what's been raised already. Are contracts in place for all voting stations for registration weekend and election day? Secondly, what plans are in place to communicate with voters where voting stations have now moved due to existing voting stations not being available? The third question in this regard, are all voting stations fully staffed at this point in time? And are these staff trained, and specifically on the VMD? Are municipal warehouses in place? Are all of those contracts and agreements in place? Are the registration printed materials ready for distribution? And what communication process is in place to reassure voters that you have the PPE in place, and what measures will be put in place to vote so that they will not be scared off by saying maybe it's unsafe? And then, Chair, zooming out to the general issues of readiness. And it's a real problem for this committee that we were assured by the IEC on the 30th of July that they were 100% ready and that they would continue to plan as if the election was on the 27th of October. So we were told that even during the height of the current third wave of infections, that the IEC had continued to prepare itself for a registration weekend. But then a few days later in court papers, when applying for a postponement, they then went and said that the registration weekend would be impossible unless the election day was moved to February. But then when the ruling was that the elections must go ahead, then the IEC indicated that they aren't sure if they're ready, but they will try. And then, Chair, on Monday, then the announcement came that we would have a registration weekend. So it's very strange to me how things moved around and how this was communicated to this committee. And my questions in this regard is really, twofold. What changed between our portfolio meeting and a few days later when the IEC submitted the court papers? I mean, when did they suddenly realize that they weren't ready? And then secondly, what changed between making the claim that it was impossible to have the registration weekend if the election date was in October, and now on Monday being able to do it? And finally, Chairperson, I'm not going to go into the reopening of the candidate lists, but I think it's out of order for the IEC to come here in this forum and say that parties are misrepresenting the judgment. Chairperson, these are interpretations. And various interpretations, it's raised questions on the independence of the IEC. So I think the IEC should be very careful to come here and say that political parties are misrepresenting the judgment. These are not misrepresentations, they are interpretations. And that is why persons are going to the court to clarify these interpretations. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Honorable Ross, for your contributions and questions. Honorable Pile.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Let me first welcome the report and presentation by the IEC. Chairperson, there's a few things that I want to raise, and I think it's important for us to take cognizance of the fact. The first thing was that the order was very clear in number 5, subsection A, I think it is, where it said that the commission must, within 3 calendar days after the date of this order, determine whether it is practically possible to hold a voter registration weekend with a view to registering new voters and changing registered voters' particulars on the national voters roll. And I think that in itself is a clear point that it was practically possible, but also in keeping with a free and fair election. I must welcome the IEC's decision to actually open the voter registration weekend for this coming weekend. They could have said that we are not going to be able, it's not practically possible, and this then would have had serious implications on the freeness and the fairness of an election had we not been given an opportunity to have a voter registration this coming weekend. So I think that must be applauded. And Chairperson, I also want to say that in terms of the part of the order where the Constitutional Court has said that the election date was invalid and set aside, this in itself means that a new date has to be proclaimed. And if a new date is going to be proclaimed, then hence an election timetable can then be amended. And an election timetable that is going to be amended, obviously those changes will then be reflected. But Chair, let me go to some of the things that I think we need to take account of and also be able to address, especially for the coming weekend and the election that's going to take place. The one question I have is in terms of temporary voting stations. If the IEC can just share with us, what plans do they have in terms of social distancing and COVID protocols? Because it's a little bit of a difficult and tricky situation because sometimes the marquees that are erected in temporary voting stations are quite small. And it's difficult to then have social distancing and to put in certain COVID protocols. Chairperson, also with regards to PPE, in that this coming weekend's voter registration is one that will be a pilot, if not a trial on how we're going to actually run the election to ensure that there is sufficient PPEs and that we are able to accommodate all the COVID protocols. Also, I just want to know in terms of reducing the risk of IEC staff, in terms of their screening and monitoring. And I don't know whether it's even possible to have them tested, because I think that's one of the risks that we need to mitigate, before they actually are at work to ensure that we have minimal risk. The next one, Chairperson, is to find out what will happen in terms of voter registration, whether it will include those voters who may not be able to visit the polling stations or voting stations. How then will we accommodate for their voter registration? But in all, Chairperson, I think it's important for us to note that the underlying and the point of departure for any one of our discussions today is that the IEC at all times, and so too with us as members, are promoting a free and fair election. And that should be the departure point or departing point for all of us, that we have to ensure that the elections is free and fair and that all South Africans are given the opportunity to cast their votes. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Play, for your contributions and questions. The Chairperson of the Select Committee on Security and Justice, Honorable Sheikh.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. And let me also join colleagues in terms of welcoming the presentation and report of the IEC. I think colleagues have covered quite a large number of issues, which I might have also raised, but Chair, I'll try and be brief as well because I might also be repeating some matters. But Chair, I think as we move towards the voter registration weekend, we should also note and commend the IEC for taking the difficult and I would also say the correct route to open all voting districts to ensure that all citizens have access to register to vote. Honorable Chair, I think that these elections obviously take place within very unique circumstances given the COVID-19 realities. The need for people to social distance. And I think there's also an additional issue of people having their own fears around around COVID. Chair, I think the question with regard to the special votes that will take place on the 2 days, if the IC can clarify whether they can expand the categories of voters that can register on those 2 days, and what would be the implications of this, whether they would need to amend regulations, etc. If you can just get clarity on that matter. Chair, the other issue, I think, with regard to reaching out to voters, in other words, communication with regard to voter registration, with regard to what COVID protocols will be put in place by the IEC. Maybe we can get an indication on how is the IEC reaching out to people. And me coming from a rural province, I would obviously be concerned about how is the message going to get to very remote and rural areas so that people are aware that voter registration weekend is taking place and they can come to the voting station and all necessary COVID protocols will be in place. And secondly, Chair, with regard to the voting districts, is the IEC, firstly, the IEC needs to ensure that they will be operational and functioning on that day. But has the IEC also, to date, done a verification in terms of all the BDs, whether they are still functional, they are functioning? Some may have shut down. If they've shut down, what has been the arrangements around this? And also, okay, staffing obviously becomes an issue, training around the staff that must man the voting stations. But the fact that you also have this COVID environment, whether there are also additional staff members that will deal with issues around sanitization, around the issue of taking voters' temperatures, etc. I think those are some of the matters that also need to be clarified. However, Chair, I think with regard to the discussion on the opening of candidates lists, I think given that the matter is in court, we should actually treat this matter as sub judice. And perhaps let us focus, on the preparedness for voter registration and voting and ensuring that we have a free and fair election. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much for your contributions, Chairperson, and all members who have interacted with the report on your comments, appreciation of good work, questions that the IEC have to respond. And I would like to urge or mobilize IEC to be specific on the areas of, particularly on the issues that are arising from questions, and perhaps on the plan implementation phases that you'll be taking. There are two areas where I think we members have highlighted in the main, which we have had consultation at the level of the political liaison committee. And I think that is one area that we've noted. And the second one is just of the court issues in relation to the IEC that the outcome has not yet been a process. So on those areas, we may not need to pressure up the IEC to enter in that space. I'm raising this given the issue that was raised by Honorable Lokwasi on the implication that may arise. And I'm not sure that you may have preempted the outcome yet. So I think we may need to be careful on your responses, particularly on the court cases. In general, members are raising the preparedness of the election because you have all the time being inarticulate on your readiness, besides the initiative that you've taken to appoint the former Deputy Justice on his inquiry. So the clarity must be within that which you have already be reported to the portfolio committee And you're correct, Chairperson Mashinini, that the pieces of legislation that we've passed with the indication that the IEC has to prepare for local government 2021. We're going to run in this follows, invite the Deputy Chief CEO or the Prasai, if the CEO, if he is back, will then go to the chairperson of the IEC, Mr. Mashinini, and the commissioners. And then we'll then go to the minister on the issues that are related to Home Affairs, which members have raised. And I think that could be a better formula to run on on this process. I'm sure I'm guiding very well in terms of your response approach, Mr. Mashinini.
Thank you, Chairperson. And thank you to the honorable members. And I think in my introduction, I might have skipped acknowledging the presence of the Honorable Minister, Motsoaledi. The Chairperson and the honorable members, I think one would like to follow a much more strict approach to the questions as the Commission, for reasons that would be appreciated and also understood by yourselves. As you've indicated, Chair, there are questions that relate to a matter that is before the courts. I think what we have said and indicated up to now is sufficient, and any further discussion on this for us would actually not be appropriate, and will appeal for the members to take that into consideration. In particular, there were specific and pointed questions that the Honorable Mgcina was reading. And very clearly, those are matters that will be sub judice for us to entertain. These relate to issues of a number of questions about the implication of the NFP case, the nomination opening, invalidated timetable, and issues of the electoral timetable. We will be making a very clear representation and in the appropriate court as the IEC. So we would beg the members to allow us that those matters are deemed to be sub judice. We cannot go into those details. Then there were a number of issues that they are more on the electoral operational matters. And yes, the CEO and the deputy CEOs who are present here will tackle those issues, from the voting and operational matters to the communication issues. And in that respect, I would invite them to actually to respond to those particular issues. This also includes questions that or comments that were raised by Honorable Rose about the Portfolio Committee Concord judgment issues. Now, we as the Commission have been on record to indicate to the Portfolio Committee that we have a constitutional responsibility to discharge that our mandate, which is quite clearly states that elections take place every 5 years and 90 days after the end of that term. And throughout that time, since 2019, we have been reporting incrementally the developments and the plans, and also addressing the issues with yourselves. So I think it is something that one should point out, that if we are saying we're ready, I mean, we're not talking about a particular degree of readiness. And in absolute terms, as now it would appear the honorable member is now raising, we are saying overall, in terms of detailed program and project plans, things are on track. As and when these are evolving, we are able to then report. Now, when we are asked that we are saying one thing to the committee and another to the courts, I'm not sure whether that is not disingenuous. We have reported our readiness on the basis of the plans as at that time. And the developments and the issues that we were raising in with the courts were clearly us pointing out what was anticipated to be probable risks and our proposed mitigating plan to those risks. But to the extent that the Concord did not grant that, does not necessarily mean we are not consistent in terms of our reporting to the committee. We have a serious responsibility that we cannot actually mislead Parliament. So I think that question or that insinuation is something that needs to be taken seriously. We have pointed out that in the plans we had, these are the risks, and particularly the risk that related to the issue of the COVID. And nobody in this country or in this world is sitting here saying they had all the certainty about what and how this COVID will unfold. We actually stated quite clearly what would say the science of probabilities and the mitigation plans that we're putting on the table. So respectfully, honorable members, we as the IEC, we believe we've not misled this committee. We've tabled to the best of our own knowledge and expertise what were thoughts and ideas and mitigating plans. So where we are now is that after the order of the Concord, we have gone back to the administration and our team and discussed the situation, and we are able then to come back with the proposition that is now being tabled about the electoral timetable. Yes, we believe that we will be able to implement and carry out that particular timetable. But are we in a position to make the guarantees that some of the honorable members are making here? I'm not sure that we can. We are going to do our best as we are required by the law, as also professionally we're responsible to discharge our duties. I thought that is important, just as the opening response from us as the Commission, to make it quite clear. We appreciate the detailed questions operationally, and the CEO and the team should be in a position then to walk us through as to where and what it will be possible in terms of the preparations that that the honorable members have inquired about. Honorable Chair, if with your permission and without further ado, can we allow then the CEO and the team, as the CEO would be discharging, to take us through the rest of the questions. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much, Chairperson. CEO or Deputy CEO?
Thank you, Honorable Chairs. With your permission, Chair, could I, in order that we save time and we are succinct, I propose that I deal and respond to questions in a thematic manner rather than repeating each question that has been asked. I beg your indulgence to do so, Chair.
Proceed, Deputy CEO.
Thank you. The questions asked by honorable members raise a number of themes. I'll deal with the first theme. The first theme relates to communication, the reach of the communication, as well as its accessibility. I can confirm that from this weekend, we are activating communications for purposes of voter registration. Consistent with research that has told us that the majority of people continue to rely on radio as a primary means of receiving information, the majority of our communication will be on that platform, both community radio, SABC radio in all its languages, as well as commercial radio stations and TV and some components of print. And because of the COVID situation, we have reduced our face-to-face contact sessions in communities, and we have redirected those to new media and social media. So that's the response, Chair, it relates to communication, its reach, and accessibility. The second theme implicates the matter of special votes. And the questions were whether there is scope to broaden the reach of special votes. And a categorical answer from us, Chair, it is yes. And we do not require legal intervention to do so. The scheme of special votes is very broad in the law. A person just needs to indicate that they will be away from their voting stations or that they are unable to come to a voting station. So that should be broad enough to accommodate all categories of persons without introducing additional categories in the regulations of 15 and above or persons with comorbidities, because then people must aver or adduce evidence that they have comorbidities, and we don't think we should go there because we are not medical specialists. The third theme relates to the readiness or level of preparedness of the Electoral Commission, and a number of pointed questions were asked. I wish to deal with those in turn. Chair, we can confirm that since we started preparations for these elections, we were constrained by what the law provided. We knew that there's a cutoff time in terms of which we must deliver free, fair, and safe elections. And we understood also that the only way that we can contemplate an election outside of that period would have been if there was judicial authorization. So our plans have always contemplated an election within the statutory time period. And for that reason, we've always said we will be ready to deliver elections as and when they were called. The first issue relates to contract for voting stations. We are in the process of reconfirming those voting stations and updating the contracts, because we had contracted for date specifically in July. So we are updating those. And as part of updating those contracts, we are also reconfirming availability of amenities and facilities at those voting stations. Staff, I can confirm that we have staff on board, and we've begun the process of refresher training, which will conclude in the next week, so that those people will be ready to administer elections. Logistics, because we've always planned on election taking place no later than November the 1st, all logistics for registrations are at hand. They are at our local storage facilities, and we will finalize picking and packing and assigning those per voting station for use at the voting station on the weekend of the 18th and the 19th. I can also confirm that the VMDs, we are in the process of stress testing them and uploading updated versions of the apps that we have developed in-house to facilitate the registration of voters. Those are being charged and assigned to voting stations. They will be used for the first time over this weekend, over the weekend of the 18th and the 19th. I've spoken about activations of communication. And deal with another thing. The change of the registration weekend from July was not because the commission was not ready. The change was because of the ravaging third wave at that point. And the commission took a decision that in light of the third wave in the majority of the country, it would be irresponsible to expose its staff and voters to harm, and by insisting at all costs to hold a voter registration weekend. We are able to accommodate it now because we are in a trough, in a period of declining and or low transmission in the mid of September. The fourth theme, Chair, related to the powers of the Electoral Commission to amend the timetable. Again, we say the scheme in the law is very clear. It is not our understanding that the Concord intended to amend the law. It is not our understanding that the Concord has removed the power from the Electoral Commission to update the timetable. To the contrary, The court, in very peremptory terms, reinforces that. It says that notwithstanding that the election had been set aside, the timetable remains extant. However, once proclamation is made, the commission must amend the timetable. So if the intention of the court was to remove that, it would have been in very explicit terms. And also, if the court had intended to constrain the powers of the commission to deal with certain aspects and not all aspects of the timetable, it would have done so. However, the matter is now a matter of court, and we are participant in that court. Just to update members of the committee, we are not opposing the direct access that the DA seeks. We are not opposing the agency on which the parties go into the Concord. We are, however, of the view that the court must dismiss the application on the merits and on the papers. The court has issued instructions, and by the 15th and the 14th, parties that are interested must submit their affidavits to that court. And to the extent that the matter is now a live court case, we await the interpretation of the Constitutional Court so that there is clarity on how we proceed, given that we must prepare for an election that must take place within an immutable time period of 1 November. And also, we so that we don't leave room for interpretation. We are confident that the proposed amendments to the electoral timetable meets all the requirements for rationality. It is rational, it is lawful, and that we will appreciate the clarity that the Constitutional Court will provide in this matter. The last themes of the question related to the impact of COVID on elections. And it might just be worth repeating as follows. When the country was first taken to alert level 5 last year, when COVID became an issue for the first time in the country, we began a process of consultation with political parties, which resulted in a protocol for managing elections or administering elections in the context of COVID. That was derived with the participation of all parliamentary parties. We have tested that protocols in no fewer than 150 by-elections throughout the country in November last year, December last year, and some early this year. And the challenge for us is to replicate those protocols on a much large scale of 23,151 voting stations. And to that end, we have provided for PPE for the registration weekend. It is in our warehouses. It will be at use in voting stations. The PPE for election day remained unfunded until this week. In that event, we are activating procurement processes because there was no way we could have procured when the item remained unfunded. Treasury has given us commitment of allocations so that we can procure PPE for use at voting stations on voting day. Chair, that concludes what I thought were the themes emerging from the members' questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Deputy CEO. I've been requested again that we must try, if we're not disrupted by a network, to switch on our video by the Secretariat and the team in Parliament. CEO, Brasa?
Chair, he may not be back yet.
Chair,
is CEO back?
No, Chair, the CEO is yet to rejoin.
It's not yet, yes.
Okay.
Through you, Chair. And
okay.
Can I just beg your indulgence, Chair? There's one other theme that has not been covered, which is the budget, and as well as a sub-theme of communications regarding the rural community constituency. I just wanted to invite the DCO Mosri if he could actually clarify that issue. But regarding the budget, we are in advanced discussions with the Treasury and regarding the supplement of the budget requirements with respect to the protocols. Otherwise, all our budgetary requirements for these elections had been covered by what you call the Treasury allocations. So except for that, the finalization, which as late as last week, the Minister of Finance was finalizing those issues with the team to see to it that we are assisted as much as possible with the shortfall that we had identified. And then I would then, Chairperson, through you, request if there's any what you call inputs from my fellow commissioners, if you could afford them to do the sweeping on some of the issues that had not been covered. But for that, if we could ask Mr. Mosri on the communications and in particular, how we're advancing the communication at the level of our rural communities. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Mosri. Then we'll go back to the commissioners if they have comments or responses. Mr. Mosri. Okay, commissioners, can you delegate to commissioners, Chairperson?
The Vice Chair can lead.
Thank you, Chairperson of the Commission, and thanks to the Chairperson of the Portfolio Committee. Greeting members and Minister. There's only one thing in the absence of the DCO Mosri. I just wanted to say that the communications, just to elaborate, that the communications have started. I do think that DCO Shiburi did mention that we are dealing with that in a whole range of different media and different languages, including issues of social media. I see that Mr. Mosri is joined, and I wonder, Chairperson, because you had asked for more detail, maybe he can give the necessary detail as you had requested, and I'll stand down. I think the rest of the issues are covered. Thank you.
Let me finish with I'll finish with commissioners. If they have comments, I'll go back to Mr. Mosri. I think that is how we must run our meeting. If there's comments from commissioners, your response, and then we'll go back to Mr. Mosri.
Thank you very much, Chairperson of the meeting, and good morning to all the honorable members. I don't have anything to add. I think I've been adequately covered by my colleagues. Thank you very much. Thank you for your indulgence. Thank you.
I'm also covered, Chairperson. Thank you very much.
Sorry, Chairperson, you are muted.
Mr. Mosri, I was asking if the commissioners they still have responses before Mr. Mosri.
Thank you, Chair. They've all indicated that they are fine. They're covered.
Thank you. Mr. Mosri.
Chairperson, Mr. Shiburi covered this particular matter sufficiently for where the committee is. What I would do further would be the detail of how much of television, how much of radio, how much of community radio we will do. We are also on social media.
Mr. Mosri, if you have no difficulty on the network, if you have no difficulty on network, you can switch on your video. But if you have difficulties, you can proceed.
Chairperson, I do not have difficulty. I was just confirming what Mr. Shiburi submitted before the committee, in terms of starting our main media-based campaign with various platforms this weekend. And that we will do in all SABC radio stations and television channels. We'll also do with all commercial TV channels. We'll also do commercial radios, radio stations. We'll also do community radio stations, community print newspapers. We will also be continuing with radio talk shows with community radio throughout this week. We will also do posters in each and every voting district. When we begin the week, there will be posters advertising the registration weekend. So that's the broad spectrum of media that we'll use. Added to this, Chairperson, would be your social media and social news groups, where we will have flags showing for every time you log in to read news or to visit those particular social media platforms. There will be messages on voter registration. So that's the total package. Physically in communities, we do have a team in every municipality, a person designated to do civic education and voter education, and the focus is obviously registration. We have singled out in the disability community a team dedicated to assist the deaf with civic education and encouragement to register to vote this weekend. We are supported, Chair, lastly, by the social media platforms to post information on elections and voter registration. These include TikTok, Facebook, and YouTube, who have special pages of information on elections. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mosri. Before we invite Mr. Sigama and the Minister, I want to thank you for the responses that you have provided. And I think I must caution that all honorable members who raised questions and commented, they are grounding their inputs on the process of conducting the oversight on the work of the IEC. I have highlighted the statement that suggests that there were comments that were insinuative to the IEC. And I don't think that it should be the spirit in which responses must be carried. Members here are doing their work on behalf of our people. So there must be that a sense of appreciation that members seek to understand, and our people has to be empowered on the information that the IEC is responding to them. I'm trying to caution that that highlight of insinuation must not give note in our part of response. So all of us collectively here as members from different parties, we have a duty to conduct oversight and get to the bottom of the issues on the work of the IEC as a Chapter 9 institution. We have grounded our appreciation of your good work. Where there are limitations, members must come in and make a recommendation. And within that context, that I'm raising this caution that it might not arise as we interact with the IEC. What we're engaging you on behalf of Parliament as members. On your part, the team IEC. I'm going to invite the Minister on the issues that were directed to the IEC, to the Home Affairs in relation to the program on the process of the ID note distribution of ID in the main, noting that we're going for the elections and voter registration, your readiness, and how you are going to assist the IEC to so that we have a credible, fair, and free election. What will be your role in terms of complementing their work of the IEC? Minister Mtsoaledi.
Thank you very much, Chair. Chair, let me start by stating that our engagement in Home Affairs with IEC is always ongoing. It does not only start because an election has been announced. On a periodic basis, I just don't know whether it's monthly or fortnightly or what, the IEC meets with Home Affairs officials on the voters' roll. In other words, to update the voters' roll in terms of new entrants, but in terms of people who passes on all the time, meaning trying to check on the death certificates who is no longer with us in this world and hence should not appear on the voters' roll. That is ongoing, and it obviously it will gain momentum during election period. The second thing I want to mention, Chairperson, and I think Mr. Sigama will give details. The only time we stopped issuing IDs was when we were at log level 4 and 5. All the other log levels, new issue IDs have always been issued, and Home Affairs is still doing so. When I say new issue, I mean those people who are applying for IDs for the very first time. The IDs that were not issuing were what you call people who were trying to replace. That means a person who has got an ID, but it is lost. Those were not issuing the IDs again, but we're giving them what you call TICs, temporary identification certificate, which has got an ID number, is acceptable everywhere where an ID is wanted, is needed. Even for elections, it will be needed. The reason that we're doing so was to try and reduce the number of people who go to Home Affairs offices. Because when you have already got an ID, we have got your details on your system, your own harness, we have got your fingerprint, we have got your photo. All that is needed is to replace it. That is back office work. And that's why we can easily issue TICs, because we don't have to do any background check, since we are dealing with a client who is already well known and who's already ours. The last thing I want to mention, Chairperson, so our problem is not really to issue IDs. Our problem is collection of IDs, as we have already said to you before. Even as I'm speaking now, we have got 418,000 IDs that have not been collected. We send people SMSs, as is generally the process, to inform them that your ID is ready, but they are still not coming. So they will also rely on members of parliament helping to spread the message that people must come and receive their IDs. Very lastly, you are aware that we've reported here last week about the issue of Saturday work with unions. But when there is an election weekend, a registration weekend, Home Affairs offices usually open, because then we'll be able to pay overtime for that weekend. And so it won't be any difference in the coming registration period. Home Affairs offices will be available even during that weekend to try and issue IDs. I'm sure Minister Sigama can give a little bit more detail to what I've said. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Minister. DDG Sigama. Mr. Sigama. Unmute, Mr. Sigama. It's difficult to get Mr. Sigama and More.
Chairperson, it seems as if Mr. Sigama is not in the meeting at the moment.
Okay.
He was a while ago, but I just thought maybe if he has got something to add, but I think the answers I've given you. are adequate to answer the questions, Chairperson.
No, thanks, Minister. We're working on your delegation. That's why we were focused on inviting him to, in your summary, and you articulate that you will give more details. So, but we notice absence. It may be due to the network position. We'll thank members for the contribution we've made. Your responses, Minister, the chairperson of the IEC, and the team of the IEC Deputy CEO for providing more detail in terms of responses. And I think we have categorized it well in terms of the theme of the issues that members have raised. We'll obviously monitor the process towards the registration. We take collective commitment to mobilize our people, in particular the youth, participate in the registration process, including your online registration. And we'll take also mobilize our people to, as public representative, to go and respond to the process of voting. The collection of ID, Minister, I think that is an area of concern which you have raised over time, that members of the community are not collecting IDs. We'll take also that responsibility as members of parliament from various constituencies and political parties. And I think this is another matter that in a party liaison committee, chairperson of the IEC, is a matter that I think it must be find expression in terms of mobilizing our people to collect their ID in various Home Affairs department. We will invite the IEC again to the joint portfolio committee meeting to receive the final preparation post the voter registration or the final preparations towards the elections, because we'll be conducting our taking close interest in terms of the process and all the issues that members have raised and the challenges that this voter registration on the 18th and 19th you will be identifying. So after that, we'll again give time, but before the elections, we'll invite the IEC to give us a broader preparations and the areas that they've identified and resolved. I think members have identified areas that you have noted. It's in that spirit that we're going to invite you back to the joint portfolio committee. I'm going to invite the chair of portfolio committee, select committee on justice and security to make closing remarks.
Apologies, Chair.
Okay. Yeah. Before Honorable Shaida, Honorable Ross.
Sorry, Chair. Sorry for interrupting. I just a request was made by more than one member whether some testing could be facilitated, and I think especially with the response that there are certain apps on these devices, I would just like to get some sort of a resolution on that. Will we be able to test the devices or have an assurance that they've been thoroughly tested? Given that with the registration system, for example, there were, let's call them glitches in inverted commas, just so that we have an assurance that they've been fully tested and nothing's going to go wrong on registration weekend.
Okay. I think that is a fair follow-up noted. Let me just quickly go to Deputy CEO.
Thank you, Chair. We have tested the devices as robustly as can be.
Just before that, Deputy CEO, let me just round up so that when you come back, at least you summarize all the issues that members have raised. I've seen a follow-up of Honorable Mcini. Let me establish, is there any other follow-up then so that we, on the issues, when they respond, then we go to the chair of the Select Committee on Justice and Security to make closing remarks. Yeah, I think it's Honorable Mcini and the matter of Honorable Ross has been noted, Honorable Mcini, and Honorable Mudisa, I think, yeah. Honorable Mcini?
No, thank you, Chair. I wanted to check, Chair, maybe I didn't actually get it. The issue for one, the setup of the voting station, if it's going to be adequate, sanitation and all of that, maybe I didn't get it. Maybe what they've answered or not, but there were many answers and like that. Like in terms of the space and the sitting arrangement, will it be there? And because some of these voting stations are very small, and the IC says no, that there's nothing we can actually do. In terms of generators, if there's a tripping of lights and all those kind of stuff, have they taken that into account? And then number two, we says that we want to look at those machines. When are we going to, can we get a date? When are we going to have a look at those machines at a demonstration? And also want to press buttons too. And they must do a demonstration there. Okay, this is how you vote. And then you'll get a receipt where I did come to vote, because I said last time that every time when we register our people, you find that that person does not appear on the voter registration on that time. And also, so they don't appear. So I don't know if maybe that was actually answered as well. But when are we going to have a test or a view or a feel of those VMDs? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Mudisa.
I'm fine, Chair. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Those were the follow-up. I think they are related. Deputy CEO.
Yeah.
Oh, Honorable, yes, Honorable Sheikh.
No, thank you very much, Chairperson, because I did have two follow-ups as well. I think the one is around the fact when we look at the COVID protocols, the IEC indicated that their PPEs are stationed in a warehouse. So I would imagine it's centralized. So I think in terms of ensuring that when a voter gets to a voting station and there's no sanitizer, to avoid such a situation, are they very clear in terms of their whole distribution around PPEs? Chair, and my second issue, Chair, I think I want to go back to the point of the issue of special votes. While the explanation is that it's very broad and it can accommodate all categories of persons, and the fact that if we introduce new categories, it will create other challenges, Chair. But Chair, this COVID-19 environment it's the first that we faced as a country. And I think the point that we're raising this question is because we want to, I think the IEC also should find ways of trying to maximize the utilization of those of the votes, the special voting days, so that it shouldn't just be that if a voting station opens, you might have a few people that will come for special votes, and then the rest of the time gets wasted. Whereas on voting day, you would have long queues, and there would be other difficulties around trying to enforce COVID protocols. And the point is that they need to look into how they can maximize, the utilization of those days, of special voting days. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Deputy CEO.
Thank you, Chair. Parties that want to test the VMD, they can make arrangement with us via their national PLC rep, and they can come here and we can avail the VMD for them to do their test. PPEs, we have a well-established logistics handling network. And just to summarize, maybe for the benefit of members, what is involved in a PPE is that we will ensure and enforce social distances in queues at the voting station. Secondly, at an entrance of a voting station, there will be a sanitizer for people to sanitize their hands before they enter the voting station. Inside the voting station on voting day, we will not be using the indelible ink that is dispensed out of a pen, because a pen means you must share the pen on multiple voters. We've jettisoned the use of the ink of the pen, but we'll apply the ink using a disposable cotton bud that we use on a single voter, and you discard that thing. There will be wipes so that surfaces that are touched often can be wiped often. Voters are encouraged to bring their pens, even though we will sanitize the pens after every use at the voting station. The last question relates to special votes. Again, Chair, the scheme of special vote is such that a person who knows upfront that they won't be in the voting station in which they are registered, that person can apply for a special vote and vote on any of the 2 special voting days before election day. Similarly, a person who cannot, for whatever reason, go to a voting station can apply or cause an application to be made on their behalf. It is the intention of the Commission to make effective use of special votes to decongest voting queues at voting days. However, what we are unable to remove is that a special vote must always be and will always be by pre-approval. So people must first apply and we approve so that we can then provide only the logistics and supplies that are sufficient to cover persons who have applied for special votes. If you don't do that, you introduce risks in the electoral process that may lead to outcomes being questioned. Persons who want to apply for special vote for whatever reason can do so in the current scheme. We do not need to make any legislative intervention. But because we are speaking to representatives of political parties, Chair, let me take advantage of this opportunity and implore people who work in connection with elections. If you go out to communities and you assist people to apply for special votes, please include the contact details of the voter, not of a party representative, because the practice is parties bring boxes and boxes of special votes application. But when those boxes are rejected, we send the message to a party rep because that's the only detail we have there. And because the person has been rejected by special vote, parties no longer have any interest in going to tell that person that the application for special vote has been rejected. So we sit with a situation where people are waiting at home on special voting days, anticipating a visit from the Electoral Commission, or worse still, unbeknown to persons, parties apply for them for special vote. When we get to those houses, people tell us we've not applied for special vote. We prefer to vote at the voting station. So while we extend this intervention to the people who are deserving, let's also make sure that it is facilitative, that we can engage directly with voters to alert them if we are running late, to indicate the time that we are likely to reach their facilities. But it is very key in instances where there are no proper addresses. We need that contact details to know so that the voter can direct us to the place where they are confined. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you very much, Deputy CEO. Chairperson Mashinini, closing remarks.
Chairperson, on behalf of the Commission, we would like to thank you for having facilitated this meeting, and would like to thank all the honorable members for the engagement and the discussion. This is a work in progress, and we welcome the next opportunity to update the honorable members about this. And thank you very much to both you and the chair of the Select Committee for having thought that it should be a joint sitting. This has enabled us to expedite the issues with both committees. We thank you very much for this opportunity and thank the honorable members.
Thank you. Minister, closing remarks.
Chair, I think everything has been laid bare and clear, but I would just like the chairperson of the commission, while he has already spoken, to reassure Honorable Mcini, because I think he kept on asking a question. Even now, I think he's raising a hand. He is not very comfortable that the new voting equipment is free of problems, and he really wants to test it. I'm just wondering and appealing to both Mr. Shiburi and the chairperson whether they can allow that, because I don't think there's anything to hide. He says he wants to press a button to make sure that the machine is working. I suppose that is something that can be allowed. That's just my plea, Chairperson.
No, thanks. Before the select committee chair, we must thank your team for presenting. We must also thank the party liaison committees where you continuously have consultation with that structure so that all of us were geared towards the credible, free, and fair elections. Hence, we've indicated that is our collective efforts that will work closely with the IEC. And where there are challenges, as we have indicated, we'll invite you back before the elections just to assess the state of readiness and the other issues that were raised, including the new devices that honorable members have indicated. We will exactly have an interaction with our secretaries of both the houses of this committee. And I think within that context, the party liaison officer central to the some of the issues that have been referred to their interaction. I'm going to invite the chairperson of the select committee on justice and security and justice to make closing remarks, and then we adjourn the meeting. Chairperson.
Thank you very much, Chair. Let me firstly thank the Minister, but also to thank the IEC for their presentation and their response to members' questions today. We are aware that the local government elections will take place by the 1st of November 2021. We have noted that the IEC has informed us that the Commission has concluded consultations with role players, including political parties in the NPLC, the National Party Liaison Committee. We note further that the IEC has scheduled voter registration for the 19th of September 2021, and this will take place at all BDs in the country, which are closer to where people live. Further, that the IEC has assessed risks and put in mitigation plans, and that they have communication plans in place to get the messages out to voters. The Commission has also informed the committee that it will produce an amended timetable consequential to the registration of voters. But I think, we as relevant committees, the Select Committee on Security and Justice and the Portfolio Committee on Home Affairs in both Houses of Parliament, while we represent different political parties, we also represent provinces. We have an oversight role to ensure that the preparations for the voter registration are in place, and especially in those areas where predominant number of poor and marginalized voters reside. Hence, irrespective of any urban, rural types of biases, and ultimately, obviously, our oversight is to ensure that there's a credible, free, and fair election. I think the IEC, as well as a Chapter 9 institution, has the responsibility to support constitutional democracy as outlined in the Constitution. And as Parliament Chair, I think we must affirm our faith in this institution to fulfill its mandate in its independence and to ensure credible, free and fair elections, and equally our trust and faith in our APEC court, the Constitutional Court. Chair, we therefore wish the IEC well in ensuring that all the necessary measures, including the training of staff and COVID-19 protocols, are in place to ensure a credible, free and fair election. But perhaps, Chair, one other thing we should do is also call on all citizens of voting age to register to vote. And if they have not done so, they should do so that they can exercise their right to vote. I think, Chair, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, honorable members. Thank you very much, Chairperson, the IEC and your team and the Minister, and our meeting of the Joint Portfolio Committee on Home Affairs and the Select Committee on Security and Justice stand adjourned.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair, and thank you, honorable members.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and good luck to the IEC on the preparations.
Thank you, Honorable Ross.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Minister.
Thank you, Chairperson. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. Bye-bye, and thanks, Brady.
Minister and Commissioner, good luck.
Thank you, Honorable Sheikh. Bye-bye.
Bye, Chairperson.